All right. Well, welcome to the first notary governance call of November 15th. My name is Kevin. Let's take a look at what we have high level for you planned for today. We kind of keep the same format as we go through these. We'll add proposals, we'll add topics, but at a high level, if you're joining or watching for the first time, this is kind of the flow that we approach. We start out with hellos, some housekeeping, attendance, make sure that everybody who's joining knows how to get the information for this deck. Then we'll move into the notary elections. We'll talk about what applications we've received, any questions you have, and go over the timeline. Then we'll get into proposals and discussions. These are pulled directly from the Notary Governance GitHub repo. We'll flag anything that's currently underway and make sure that it's on your awareness, give you a chance to weigh in, view the comment, and add your ideas and feedback. And then we'll leave some time at the end if there was anything that you might have that you wanted to add for this call and discussions. And then we also open it up for any LDN or applications that want to flag or discuss their issues. This is obviously time dependent, so we ask anybody who's interested in this to record a brief 4 to 5 minute video. That way, in case we don't have time for them to give a full presentation, they can answer any questions, and then I'll share that with the notaries. So with that, let's take a quick look at the team. So the governance team is made up of a combination of the notary groups, the working groups, the trust and transparency. So you'll see Deep, myself, Galen, Simon, Phil, KZ, RG on this call. Many times KZ's not here today, he kind of pops in. But if you need anything, we're available on Slack, and we kind of have a focus area. For those of you that have been with the Phil Plus for a while, you might have tagged Deep, myself, RG for any issue that you might have had going. What we're trying to do is specialize a little bit more. As the community grows, it gets more and more difficult to triage and get you the help you need. So make sure, like, if you are looking for like an LDN application, if you tag Galen and RG, it will go a lot faster than tagging Deep and myself. Feel free, if you are blocked or you can't find anything, to always use us as appropriate. But again, we're just the friendly team to back you up as you go through it. If you're on the call for the first time or you're joining after a while, you'll notice that a lot of our names might not be filled out, and it makes it really difficult to come back and look at this for SLA participation. So if you do click on the top 3 dots, you can edit your name and hit rename. And if you just change it to something where it makes it easy to identify like where you're from or what your organization is. So I just changed mine from Kevin to Kevin at Filecoin Foundation. Goes a long way to like making it more easy to answer your questions. So if you wouldn't do that, we'd be very grateful. If you're joining this call, whether you're a new applicant to the notary program, a storage provider, or you've been coming here for a while, we use Airtable to mark down who's been on the call and then make sure we mark you down for SLA participation. So to grab that link, the deck is online. I'll also grab it right here for you by clicking this link here. And I'll put this here in chat. You go ahead and fill out this Airtable. We'll then use this for the SLA credit for you coming and spending your time on this call with us now. So you'll find that link inside of the chat right now. All right. We now have multiple sessions that are kicking off. We talked a lot about this at Phil Lisbon. If you haven't had a chance to watch those videos or check out the slide decks, a few slides later in this, I'll make sure that you have the links available. But there's 2 working groups, the Trust and Transparency and the eFil Plus. So if you were looking to get started with this, if you haven't done it before, on the screen right now is the basic information on when they meet, what their core missions are, as well as what their Slack information is. So again, these slides are in the chat of this Zoom call, and then all the information to join these. This will be important for those of you that have signed up for your notary application and want L4 or higher scoring. I think it's even L3. You're committing to join one of the working groups. So this is the information to kind of kick you off on the right path before we really get started on that. So before I go on, I'll pause for any questions. I know we have some new folks on the line, but before we get into the agenda on the notary elections, is there any questions about the format, what we're going to talk about, or anything on the call? All right, some changes just posted in chat. Deep, Simon, myself, we'll get back to you and get through it. All right, notary elections. Let's talk about what's going on with this right now. 91 applications received so far. So I pulled this as of maybe 30 minutes ago. we had maybe 30 applications come through just last night alone. This isn't unusual. We usually have an open period for around 2.5 weeks, and we get the majority of the applications in the last 2 days. So if you are a notary on the call, you would have got a DM from me last night just saying, hey, friendly check-in. I saw a few of you get it in. But if you were expecting to become, if you expected your application to be there and you didn't see it, please flag me with a DM. But as of right now, 91 applications to date. You'll see me go through and assign it to myself, add a tag, and it just makes it a lot easier to make sure that we're getting you what you need. If you have not applied yet, if you are keen to apply, if you're coming for the first time, you'll go to this GitHub file repository. If you have any questions, it's posted in the Fil Plus Slack, and that has all the information on the slides, where to go with the links. But to fill out an application, just click that link, new application, and then update the fields as best applied. If you were a third round notary and applying for the fourth, you could just essentially take your third round application, copy it, paste it in this fourth. There's only a couple new fields. We just modified the SLA. We asked for some more information on where you geographically operate. So that's just as simple as going through there as you go through it. Next step for us is Sweet Phil and I will be spending our Thanksgiving collecting all of these applications and then essentially putting them into a rubric. Phil's thumbs up. And essentially what you say is, like, if you have a stake that's applicable to an L1 score, we give you that score. When your SLA is an L4, we give you that score. We make it as extremely transparent as possible. There's no privacy that goes through with this. Everyone can see everyone else's scores, and we'll be posting that back. So in order for us to do this, we may need additional information from your applications. So that means, as far as like next steps, here's what to expect. Right now, applications are open. So folks are submitting still. We're not doing any scoring. We're just waiting for them all to come in. Once this application period closes, I will add a comment, to each individual application. Like, hey, we've received it. Thank you so much. Next steps are standby. And I'll be sending you a link to essentially additional information. We collect some information on the backside that we don't put in the issues, just to give you a little bit more privacy. Things like email, like best way to contact you, what time zones do you operate in, if we need any more information on your application. This will go out to 100% of all the applications. So look for it in the application itself, and we'll have all the contact information. We'll also be using this time to ask any clarifying questions. So if you say you're associated with like a certain organization, we might say like, hey, great, I see that you're affiliated with, JP Morgan Chase. Can you please verify your email with this organization, or something basic, as we kind of link these back. And this will be the first step before we start the due diligence on the KYC, KYB after the notaries are selected. So my feedback here is that if you've turned in an application, you will be getting information from Phil and myself probably early next week for you to fill out. So be mindful to check back in your application. I'll tag it, but next week you'll be asked for any additional information that comes through. Once we do that, this is what the timeline looks like. Currently, applications are open. We're in the highlighted period, as you see on the screen right now. And on the 16th, we will cut off new applications coming in. So be very mindful to get those in. And then from the 16th through December 9th, that's when we'll be scoring. So that's that time to please check your application. Please check your email or Slack that you gave us to list for that questions. Because if we reach out to you and we need information to make your score more transparent, or to unblock something and we don't hear from you, we'll just go with what's in the form. So that might cost you points. So be very mindful to check your comms during that period. Then on December 9th, we'll send a mass post out to the Fil Plus Slack channel, share all this information with you, as well as update the GitHub repositories and contact all the newly selected notaries for congratulations. So at a very high level, that's what we're currently doing with the applications. That's where we currently stand with the timelines, and this is what we're working on right now. We answered these two FAQs. I'll leave them up on the screen, and then I'm also going to unmute and open the lineup for any questions, comments, concerns for anybody on the call who wants to discuss the notary election. So this is your time. Does anybody have any comments or questions for the application process right now?
Is what's the deadline for getting in applications tomorrow?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for that, Alex. Last time we had it tied to Pacific time. I think it's just going to be your time zone. So I'm not going to be like a stickler, like a college professor, like, midnight. Just tomorrow is the deadline where we stop saying like, hey, we're actively soliciting these. So just get it in by Wednesday, your time zone, and it'll be okay.
Do you mean like Wednesday end of day or end of like
Wednesday end of day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, hey, Kevin. You messaged me today on the Slack. I just messaged back. Did you see? Just want to check out.
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you. I appreciate you doing that. And then I'll just link that application into our Slack channel. That way we have that comms. But yeah, thank you for writing back.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Eric, floor is yours, bud.
Oh, hi. Sorry. Could you please pardon the part which you say how to do KYC with Phil for the notary application?
Yeah. So after the notary is selected, what we'll do is we'll send a very small amount of fill to the wallet address that was provided to us in the application. And what that does is it verifies that the ledger is all properly set up and the wallet is good to go. And then we also collect information on country of origin. There are some countries that we're not allowed to work with and store that information. So that's that last step in the process. So as far as like once the notary has been selected, we'll be reaching out and we'll be sending you a small amount of fill to that ledger address as part of the verification, along with email, your base of operations, and that kind of information.
Understand. Thank you.
Alex, are you raising your hand again for another question, or are you?
I just forgot to lower it.
All right.
Sounds great. Again, any questions, just ask it in the Phil Plus channel. Send me a DM if you're a little bit shy, whatever it works. But I think the big thing is thank you for all of you that have put in your applications. And you'll be hearing from us next week as far as like a ping in the actual application to start that dialogue to get your score all set up. Any questions, feel free to keep them coming and we'll get back to you. So with that, we have 4 proposals to kind of chat through today. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Deep if you want to take over for 702, bud.
Sure, yeah. I think 702 we've talked about a couple of times now. It came up in Lisbon and Phil actually. I think might be better if you chat through the details.
Yeah. So 702 came up because as you guys have known recently, like the LDN multisig has been depleted of data cap recently. That's because Phil Lisbon has been happening and root key holders have not responded in time to refill this LDN multisig. As a result, people complained, and there were a lot of that was a big bottleneck. And so to fix this, we decided to increase the refill amount. So basically, it used to be the case that root key holders would refill the LDN multisig with a 2-week expected usage volume. So we expect this amount of data cap to be finished within 2 weeks. But then now we're going to do it with a 4-week expected volume, making it a larger amount. That gives us a bigger buffer for until the data cap in the multisig finishes. So basically, every time we refill the LDN multisig, we just keep filling it up with double the amount this time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is root key holders have also had trouble. Even if they wanted to sign, there was a big bug last week that prevented them from signing, and that is really difficult. So we need to train them to kind of like, just in case the front end fails, sign through the Lotus node. So those are the 2 things to kind of like remedy the situation of data cap depletion. And yeah, so I think those two will basically fix the data cap problem for this LDN multisig. If you have any thoughts or comments, you can like feel free to comment on this issue or like DM me. Yep, good.
Thanks, Phil. Let's see if there's any questions. Sorry, this is a net new one. I had this flipped with a different one in my head, but I think this will help a lot in terms of just reducing the friction, at least from our side. Like it's often Gil and I that are pinging and trying to get RKH up, and if there's any bugs, then that slows things down. And so reducing the cycles that we have to take with people that are less in the loop, I think is a good thing. The second thing is we initially set up the 2-week thing as a security recommendation where it was like, oh, don't pre-assign like that quote unquote that much data cap like upfront to the LDN multisig in case like V3 doesn't work or doesn't feel like a good move. But at this point, I think we've, it's been several months that we've been operating it and that we have a decent amount of confidence in the system. And so feels like a good change to me, but I'd love to hear if anybody disagrees.
Also, shout out to Faye for bringing this up. This proposal wouldn't exist without her like bringing it up as an issue in the discussions.
No problem.
Him.
Cool. With that, we can hand it back to K-Ray for the next issue.
Okay, I'll do a quick intro on this and hand it over to Hung Hao actually, who I think will be here to present the slides. Hey folks, so this one is on indexing. I think Hung Hao will give you a little introduction to the network indexer, but the idea here is effectively ensuring that some Fil Plus deals or some subset of verified deals being made on the network that are expected to be like open deals and have fast retrieval enabled should automatically be called out to the network indexer as well, so they could be better tracked and tested against in the long term. Hung Hao, we have your slides integrated, so we're gonna pull you up if you're there. If not, I know that Torfin is also around from the Bedrock team.
Yep, I think I can
Here,
present.
cool. Yeah, take over. Carrie, do you mind going to the next slide?
Cool, thanks. This is Hong Hao, me, Torfin, Brenda, and Lauren. We're in the call. We're from the Bedrock side of things. And sorry for the styling misalignment here. Didn't know there's a template for this call. But yeah, today we just want to discuss more on the what would be the ideal scoping for the default indexing. If you mind going to the next slide. So for context, network indexer, you can view them as beefy nodes that we run to store the index so that we can enable the content discovery efficiently at scale, more efficient than DHT. And today, the setup is we basically default announce the index. And if you want to not announce, you can turn it off. This is designed based on the assumption back then that we have is most of the data in the network are public. So we just set it to default announcing of the index. And the goal right now, we're thinking that we want to embrace more and more enterprise use case, especially with private data. So how do we involve this infra to better serve these needs? Among which one of the decisions we want to make is what kind of default indexing mechanism we should do that will better serve these non-public data. Specifically, one thing that we plan to add is to have a is public flag in the deal structure to set the deal as public, and which implies that this data, since it's public, it can be indexed and it can be retrievable. For the deals that are not public, that are set as not public, there is longer term plan to introduce access control with the help of like partners like say Gravity and Lighthouse Storage, which are working on these solutions that we could integrate with. And this is kind of similar to the common cloud practice like AWS, where by default they assume your data is private, and then if you want, you can make it public, and with public, there's no control over the, there's no gating over the data. So there's more comments on this, which I actually need some inputs from this call at the last slide, which we will come back to this public flag. And the main question that we want to discuss is what data should be default published to the indexer. This is meant to be more like a discussion, I hope, in this call, instead of us deciding to what direction that we want to go for. We do have a preference, but we just want to present some options here for now. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so there's, I think, mainly 3 options that come to our mind. And if you have other suggestions, feel free to suggest as well. The first one that we're talking about, which is what Deep is providing the context on, is only default indexing for Field Plus deals. And basically we check if it's fast retrieval enabled and if it's verified deals. And because we assume that these are the deals that need to be reliable for retrieval, and as a result, it might make sense for them to be default index. This is configurable, so you can turn it off basically by setting the is public flag to be false. And if either of these criteria are false, like fast retrieval and verified, then we default not index unless you configure it otherwise, which is setting the is public to true. There's a link to the more detailed proposal. Let me just paste it quickly in the chat. Thanks. Yeah, so you can feel free to comment more over there as well, which shows more details in terms of how this could be implemented and if we go with this, what kind of detailed plan over there. And the second option is basically to not index for all by default. So all of the deals will not be indexed by default, assuming privacy of the data. And you can configure on each individual deals to turn on the indexing, basically by setting the is public to true. There's some nuances in how this could be done. Our inclination is that if we go with this path, we don't want to touch the legacy index because it gets complicated of how do you update those old index. So we'll keep the old one intact, and once effective, only applies to the future deals going forward. And the last option is sort of in line with what we're doing today, is default indexing for all of the deals. And we can configure to turn off the indexing for individual deals by setting the is public to false. So this gives more capability to configure individual deals, and it's more in line, kind of in line with what we're doing today. But it's a stronger assumption of on the publicity of the data. There are obviously pros and cons for each of these. I kind of want to open up if folks want to have your inputs on what do you think? Is there any outstanding issues, especially on the first option, and that you have in mind, and we can kind of discuss from there.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Hangout. I just had the question around like in which layer this change actually happens. Like my understanding is that this is just like a like an update that we can make at the markets code. What I'm curious about is what would happen if this were to like change again in the future, or if in this future world of FVM, like new deal making markets are introduced, how does like network indexer get updated, or how do we continue to do that call out? This is just like, I guess, my lack of knowledge and where in the stack this would come in.
Yeah, I think
right in this case, yeah.
Yeah, if you can quickly go to the next slide, it might be a good segue to discuss the other open question that we want to get input on. So the second point here is, so this is part of the deal proposal, which align with the boost latest schema. And right now we're thinking this is not on chain. We want to know if this is something that should be on chain. For the actually the slide hasn't been updated. It looks like. Let me just quickly follow this link. So the question that we have is, do we need on-chain visibility on whether the client has requested Field Plus deal to be public or private or not? Because we think that Notary probably will only get accountability if the data is on-chain. So this is still an open question that we also want to get inputs on.
From my perspective,
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
From my perspective, I think that information should be public, because it will like hold people, like it'll hold them more accountable, right, for their actions.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I would like to hear everyone else's thoughts.
Yeah. So one of my questions would be like, what's the impact on the network indexer infrastructure for having like everything public? I think that's probably the best default, just because everything is already public. You can encrypt it and whatnot, but at the end it's public, so you can find every seed and the content. So whether it's public or not is probably more on the encryption and not on the like findability of it. And so I guess the question is more on the network indexer decision for like your own infrastructure and impact. So I don't know, that's those are my thoughts. Probably keeping everything public is the best default. So
I think the challenge you're going to run into, Hung Hao, at like the keeping it public and like on chain and stuff will be around like using terminology that is subjectively interpretable, right? Like saying something is public, like it is actually a combination of other parameters. So I think when you do take this to being like public data, like on-chain data, then I think it's actually those parameters that have to be lit up as well-known fields. So it's like, was the proposal made with fast retrieval? Like maybe that just needs to end up somewhere on chain. Was like is I don't know, like because retrievals aren't on chain, it's kind of hard to track, like even historically, like who's retrieving what and how much. But maybe we start just there, and then like your storage market, in which case happens to be the storage market actor with Boost and all the other stuff that we've built so far, happens to interpret the combination of verified deal and fast retrieval and maybe scrape data from Fil Plus or whatever as open as like something. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is like making that notion of whether or not something was meant as open data or public data to be on chain itself as part of, like, for example, today, like the way we know that is we scrape an application, right? Like when somebody applies for data cap, they write like, oh, this is open data, or I expect this data to be available to anybody. And that is not represented anywhere on chain. And maybe that something like that needs to become part of like on chain as part of like the deal proposal from the client address that ends up as part of an artifact of the deal. And I could see many additional use cases for that. So I am personally pretty supportive of that. We'll just have to figure out exactly how you would expect that to be defined and do it in a way where it's like very, very objective and cannot be interpreted in different ways, if that makes sense.
I think it makes sense. We're definitely not against doing this on chain. We probably need to if we want to actually enforce or validate these things. I guess like in line to your point, if you can go back to the last slide, maybe to kind of discussion point is for number one option, I think the inherent underlying thing here is that we're kind of making assumption on what are the data that should be public. Because we're basically picking a subset of the data that we want default index on. I wonder, is this the correct assumption? Is there any concerns for kind of scoping the default indexing to this way? And then the second to Alessandra's comments, I think if we do default index for all, basically what we're doing today, one potential risk is then basically for the clients that actually want to store the say enterprise private data, are they like against this kind of default public mechanism? So that specifically, I'm curious if there's any folks on the call that handle these kind of enterprise use case can chime in and comment on what you think about option number 3 as well.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from some of the notaries and storage providers in the room. Eric, Faye, Neo, Patrick, thoughts on this?
Yeah, for me, I think I agree with Hong Hao. I think this is a really important step for the development of the retrieval market. Actually, I think this is open the fast retrieval will improve the retrieval experience from the client and also enhance the delivery of the Saturn network. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, so we mean Indexer allows the content discovery, which is a part of the crucial path to the retrieval as well. Right now, I think the state is basically we already have this enabled. It's default on, and the question is whether we should scope it down for the private to respect more of the private use cases, the enterprise data storage side of things.
Yeah, I think we needed to demo and maybe we will show us, right? Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't understand the question.
I mean that in I'm not sure in this future in proposal is to what's the status for these futures, and do you have a sample or another? Thank you.
You mean what's the date, proposed date for the change?
Sample demo, yeah. Maybe
Oh, I see. You mean like demo for scoping the index itself?
yeah.
Yeah, I think right now we want to kind of figure out how do we want to scope it. So yeah, so we won't have a demo on how do we scope the data. But if you were thinking about from the experience wise, regardless of what option that we go for, it will be an option. It will be basically have its public included in the deal structure, and you can set it with different configurations with Boost.
Got it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
but the focus more that we want to figure out more is on how do we give the option for SP to scope this indexing side of things.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess for the File Plus program, like if it's like File Enterprise, it should be like default for to be off in some ways, but they can like turn it on. Because like for the like most recent like application, I saw their data is like they can be public, but for most of the File Plus Enterprise project, especially for the one like the steel storage one, which and they require some of their data to be private. So that's the reason like that like why we want to have like a File Plus Enterprise, right?
Yeah, second your point, I'm curious though in this case because on the flip side, there's also benefits of publishing the data that is okay to be published to the network, so that like for example, we have discovery of where the content is and also retrieval program relies on the index as well. So I'm thinking for the number one option, for the fast retrieval and verified deals, those are basically considered as not the private ones, right? So is it okay to default?
Yeah. I mean the normal File Plus one is good, but for the File Plus Enterprise, it should be.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
Understood. Yeah, I think
Okay,
that makes sense.
That's tricky, right? Because that means, I guess, because you don't know Fil Plus on chain or not on chain, so then that means 3 is problematic for enterprise. Am I getting the wrong takeaway? Hung out, what are you hearing?
I didn't quite understand, dude. Can you repeat that?
So I guess going back to the point, if there's an issue with eFil Plus versus like regular Fil Plus or whatever, then the implication is that the class of client influences what option is feasible, which then means enterprise would not want this to be the case.
Yeah, probably.
Which then means because you don't know when something is enterprise or not enterprise, you can't go for 3.
I'm not quite familiar with eFil Plus. How do you distinguish eFil Plus deals versus DeFi Plus deals?
It's all off-chain distinguishing. All it results in is basically you're going through a slightly different notary due diligence pipeline. And the expectation is that the data is private and encrypted and likely not to be retrievable by like anybody on the internet. But from an on-chain standpoint, I think it's very, very hard to distinguish. Even if you went with option number 1, it could be that those deals are made with fast retrieval and all of them will be verified.
Got it. Okay.
So I don't functionally see how we can actually serve that as a need other than like, I guess to put this differently, I think distinguishing between classes of customers, like going back to your original question, distinguishing between classes of clients that are coming through the Fil Plus pipeline is basically impossible because there's no on-chain representation of what type of client they are. And so if you go for number 1, let's say, like functionally, the difference between 1 and 3 is probably not that different. I would imagine most verified deals are going with fast retrieval.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
we'd probably end up more in a game of having to educate storage providers anyway. And so I think like you could go with one and say that like that's because you're expecting fast retrieval to be better correlated with open data. And so that's why you're picking one. Or I think you could position this to go for 3 and say, here's how you're gonna like have a robust like notification and education plan for storage providers. And then your actual stakeholder in this decision will probably become storage providers. And so I would like to understand the implications on like SPs from like a resource standpoint, actually, to pick between 2 and 3.
Yeah, I think.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out here. Yeah, if EFIL plus here's assumption of the data shouldn't be public, and they could be fast retrieval enabled and verified deals, then yeah, the number one might be the wrong assumption of what deals should be public. Then in this case, sounds like, from what I'm hearing, sounds like the default off, but while giving the option to set it to is public equals true to index it, seems to be the case that will work for. It has the least assumptions on these things.
It does have the least assumptions, but it will also be the less likely to drive the most default adoption of the indexer. And so I think this then turns into a trade-off thing on like, are there actually any downsides of announcing for a search provider from like a resourcing standpoint and a risk standpoint, right?
Makes sense.
I think that if you can present that, then I think you can either rally the community around option 2 or option 3, depending on what like SPs that are actively doing business development. Basically, that's your stakeholder. They're the ones that will likely bring the heaviest weight vote. Yeah, definitely. Is there any other SP that want to chime in? I don't want to hold this call for too long here. So what I'm thinking is I could post an update to discussion 666 here regarding the option 2 and option 3, and then I would love to hear more from your use case or any concerns or bias that you have on this, and we can follow up from there. If there's no more comments here. Cool. If you can quickly go to the last slide, I'll just quickly call out a note, which I think is important. So when we say it's public equals false, I just want to clarify that even if you say it's public, it's not false. It's public is false. It doesn't really imply full privacy. Just want to clarify here, because to achieve this, there need to be additional layer of access control and all these to be built on top, which the team, direct team is looking into in the near future. But without that happening, setting the is public equals false doesn't guarantee full privacy. Just want to make it clear over there. Cool. All right, thanks, Deep.
What would be the difference between is public and is indexed or something more like that?
I think it's public. Basically, it reflects the status of the deal, like what you think the deal should be public or private, and indexable or retrievable are more like the implication of that state.
But isn't it that what this option is about? Like if that's to be indexed for the network indexer. I don't know, just commenting.
Right. If you say it's public false, sorry, if you say it's public true, yeah, the implication is we do want to index the data, but we're using the is public because it's more reflective of the state of the deal itself, less tied to the implementation details here.
I see. Thanks.
Cool. Hanghao, just as a note, we actually have 2 governance calls every day that we have them. So there's a second one, I think 6 p.m. Pacific time. This is of course recorded, but that will be a different audience. So if you're available or if Torfin wants to come, it might be cool to have you guys there too. It'll be a slightly different audience. If not, we have this recording. It's going to be available publicly, and one of us can update the community to check that out.
Okay, sounds good. Follow with you on the link for that.
Sounds good. Thanks for coming. Carrie, back to you, sir.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys. This one is just a real quick check-in. So we talked about this at Phil Lisbon, and I think we talked about this on the October 18th call. This is just one of those going, gones, that blue light special that we like to highlight. And this is the LDN application. We've asked for the addition of country of origin. So if you had any strong conviction, this is your last chance to kind of log into this. The issue 625 is linked in the PowerPoint that I put in Slack, as well as in the GitHub. But just a final input for you before we close this out. This was that last community huzzah. And 631 is the exact same boat. This is in the final days before we close out this proposal. So if you'd like to review this issue, it's essentially adding the email address to the LDN template. Makes it a lot easier for the KYC, KYB. We had no real strong pushback on the 18th or during KZ's talk at Phil Lisbon. So just consider this one friendly reminder. If you'd like to log in, give a thumbs up if you like it, give a comment if you'd like to see anything changed. But this is one of the last calls for 631. All right, we posted the links for Phil Lisbon inside of the Slack channel and on the Notary Governance. This is just a friendly linking it for anybody who may have missed these or want to tune in. The point of Phil Lisbon was a recording session for people that might not be as familiar with the program and wanted to learn more about it. We translated all of the talks into Mandarin. So if you wanted to see the subtitles, that should be available for all the talks we have listed. So Simon and Phil led the introduction to the program. The intent of this one is if someone had not heard of Phil Plus and you wanted to give them just a quick 10 minutes on what the program is, how does it work, and how do they get involved, that's where you would tune into Simon and Phil's talk. Galen and Deep led a state of the program, much more deep dive on what are the metrics, what are the KYC, or excuse me, the KPIs that we're looking at, and what's going to be happening coming forward in the next round of quarters when we have 2023. KZ and RG both led specific sessions to their working groups. You could check those out. The runtime for their talk is around 15-20 minutes, and then the runtime of questions is another 15 or 20. So if you're looking for just a real quick deep dive into like, what is this group? How would I get involved? Those are great places to start. If your really time is of the essence, just watch their talks and skip over the chats and you'll get a quick sense of how to get involved with it. And then the last is the Notary Election. We had shared some of like the common questions, some of the questions that would be applicable to the applications and going over that. So if you want to watch that video, it's all there for you as we go through it. So with that, we are looking at maybe about 10 minutes left on the call. We have 4 LDNs that have prepared videos. We won't have time to show all 4, but we will let them introduce themselves and I'll make sure the links are shared. Before we do that, I wanted to turn the floor over if anybody had any flags, any questions, or any items for discussions for the community. Now the floor is yours. All right, that works as well. Okay, one last plug. Here is the link to the Airtable. If you joined after the call, you might not see it in the chat that came through a little bit earlier. So I'm just going to repost that Airtable link here. This is how we use it for the SLA. This is how we use it for the participation. We'll be updating this as we go forward. But one more shot on that. So we had 4 LDNs that prepared videos. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post these videos in the LDN Application Review Slack channel, as well as in the Notary channel. So you can take a look. All 4 of these applications are around 2 weeks old. A few of them are like really brand new. So these are highly motivated organizations that are really keen to move forward. So they wanted to get this on your radar. Rather than playing the video here, that might not be the best use of time. Maybe what we'll do is we'll just give them a minute or two just to kind of say hello, introduce their program without screen sharing, and then all of the video will be available for you notaries to watch later. So I might mispronounce this, but the Rosheng Info Network, were you on the line? Did you want to say just a quick hello and make sure there was any questions that might come for you? All right, no worries. What about you? Are Dobo, might be mispronouncing that. Are you on the line right now? All right, maybe just going off. Is anybody who made one of these videos or an LDN applications on the line? The floor is yours. So if you're here, unmute. It's all you. Eric, I see that hand. All you, bud.
Okay, sorry. I was asking the deep for the project beacons. The multi-sign address was empty, so kindly I will help you to refill it. We're waiting for that. Thank you.
Good call. Thank you. I realize now that Galen had made the request to the RKH based on an older line of logic, which sent a limited amount to that notary, right? So I think we just need to get one more proposal moving on that. That is something we can do on our end. Thank you. Gary, if you want to play any of these or drop links to them, I think we can call it here. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Rather than playing the videos, I'll just make sure that those links are in the calls, in the channels, and that way everyone can back on it. All right, last call before I give you all a couple minutes back on your lives. If anybody has any last thoughts, inputs, this is the chance.
A quick question for the notary application. So do we have to use the like new address this time, like the last time?
When you say new address, like a new ledger address separate from your third round?
Yes, like the last time, like you asked us to give you the new one, right?
That's a great question. Maybe I'll go and then deep. I might kick it back to you. I think during the third round, we were also simultaneously rolling out the multi-sig for the LDN v3, which required us to have that new address. Deep, is there any reason why we can't just use the same address from last on this fourth?
Deep, you're mute.
Sorry, when you say that, you mean like notary cannot reuse their notary address, correct?
Correct. Can they use the same address from their last?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the past, the reason we requested notaries to roll addresses for each election was primarily for two reasons. The first was that it made it significantly easier to track performance of a notary over a period of time. And the second was because it forced notaries to reevaluate, especially those that were applying as organizations, just healthy practices on who actually owns the address, who has the ledger, is security access correctly set up for it. I think given the improvements in chain scraping, as well as the fact that like the application process itself has become significantly more robust, I think it's reasonably safe for you to keep the same notary address for now. If that changes for whatever reason, we'll be sure to tell you in the next 3 weeks. But I think you should continue with your same address for now, and that's okay.
Cool, thanks.
Good question. Thank you.
So I already filled out with a new address. Should I change it back?
Up to you, Faye. No pressure at all. If you prefer just keeping the same one, I think you should go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have 3 open issues on the community side, so we'll talk about those, give you a chance to weigh in before we close them out. We'll have plenty of time at the end of this call. We had extra time in the morning for anything you guys might want to raise. It's not on the agenda. And we had 4 LDN applications submit videos. So I'll be linking the video content. And if you have any questions, if they're on the line, we'll give them a chance. So with that, we'll kick right into it. Friendly hello from the governance team, Deep, Galen, myself, RG, Simon, and Phil. We all take a specific aspect of the roles within the Phil Plus community to back you up. So if you have an issue and you need help, feel free to tag us. One thing that we are asking is that please don't just tag all of us for any issue that you have. It creates spam, and then usually what happens is we just tune out because there's so much. So if you need something with trust and transparency or LDNs, RG and Galen, perfectly aligned. Anything with like elections or notaries or the on-chain address, tag me and I'll back you up. And of course, if you're ever stuck, you can always tag me to kind of route that as we go through it. Obviously, Simon and Phil onboarding with notary incentives and looking at these programs as we go forward. If you're on the call right now, if you change your Zoom handle, it makes it much more effective for communicating with you. So right now my name says Kevin, but if I click on my picture, I can rename and put something like Filecoin Foundation. And then that way, if anybody has a question or wants to ask anything, rather than just being a random name, just makes it a lot easier as we go forward. I'm going to post the link here in chat to the Airtable. You seasoned vets that have been on this call for a while, you're very familiar with this. If you've been doing this right off the bat, this is how we track the SLA for the participation points. Just being part of the community, showing up, giving your feedback, or just tracking it goes a long way. So this is the link to the Airtable. It's in chat. Go ahead and fill that out when you have a free moment. Okay, the two links for the true working groups that we have are right there on the screen right now. You might have noticed in the notary application that when we ask for SLA participation, one of the fields listed, hey, if you'd like to get more points and get really active in Fil Plus, we'd like to see you join the working group. Here's the information for these two working groups. If you were keen to have this slide deck, this is also in the Fil Plus Slack channel and the thread comments too, if you want to follow along. But in the Trust and Transparency working group, they meet the opposite times as this governance call takes place at 8:30 and 17:30. All the links are right there, and their whole perspective is how are we looking at this model to bring out more trust. I guess that's why that's in their name. And then the second program there with the Enterprise Fil Plus pilot, you might have heard Kevin Z talk about this at length, but they also have an application form for you to join. And what they're looking at is how do we scale this program and then make this more applicable for a wider audience. So two really good missions. If you want to get involved, that's all the information to dial in with them as we go forward. So with that, notary elections. Here's where we stand. As of this morning, we had 91 applications that's come through. This just blows it out of the water. It's probably like 40% more than we had at the third round of elections earlier this spring. Probably it's well over 100 as of today. If you've turned in your application, you'll see it right there in the GitHub repository. And what I've been doing is anytime these applications come through, I've been going through and assigning it to myself, changing the label. And this is just a really quick way that lets you know that I've actually seen it, received it, and gone through. So as long as you've seen your application come through and seen it changed, it's in, you're good to go. What happens next is if you haven't already applied, we really recommend that you do so. Just come into the GitHub, come to the Notary Governance. You'll see the link there and just create an issue. You fill out some information about yourself, your organization, how long you've been participating, and that'll be the basis that we use to start scoring your application. The way that scoring process works is essentially we read through each category. It's all public, it's all transparent, and we assign a numerical system to whatever the question is and how you put it on. That process is going to take us about 2 weeks, and we'll start on that on Thursday. So what we'll do is we'll read through each and every application. We'll assign a numerical number to each question that you filled out, and then we'll reply back in your GitHub with a score. Hey, here's 4 out of 5, 3 out of 5, and we'll essentially give you the opportunity to provide additional information to raise your score or provide any kind of questions that might be outstanding. So with that, the next steps are this. Currently, right now, you'll see all the GitHub applications labeled and updated. Next, myself and Phil will be going through each one of those applications and then sending you out information like, hey, we didn't see anything about a bookkeeping plan, or hey, you forgot to write a number on your SLA, or hey, your website didn't work. Can we get some more information? We'll be doing a lot more of that. We will link inside of the application that you submitted. So the request that we have is that you please check your application because you'll see some threads come through. If you wait until like December 8th to write back, we're probably not going to have time to incorporate it. So the faster that you could write back to the questions, that gives them more time for us to really incorporate it back onto it. So this is definitely one of those, please don't wait to the last minute to provide any information because it might not get incorporated as we go through. Once we get all that information, we'll give you a score. We'll give you a chance to kind of look at it. We'll combine all those scores in the last couple of days, and we'll announce the people selected for the 4th round of notary elections on December 9th. So with that, we have 2 questions that seem to be coming up quite a bit. So just want to give them an airtime, and then I'll open this channel up for any questions that anyone else might have. So skipping ahead, here's the 2 main questions that I'm getting. Number 1, if I'm already a notary, whether it's the 2nd or 3rd election, do I have to reapply? So short answer, no. Long answer is this: highly recommended. And here's the reason why. We had notaries that were in the 2nd round of election that did not apply in the 3rd, which means they didn't complete a lot of the additional updated diligence and KYC and KYB. So when it came time to add them to the multi-sig for LDN v3, we didn't have any information, and we had a proposal and it didn't pass to add them. So essentially what you're doing by reapplying in this 4th round, aside from re-upping your data, you're essentially future-proofing anything that might change to stay current with the program. You don't have to. If you have your data and you're all set, you're good to go. But we strongly recommend, it's the same application, just with a few more fields. Just copy all the information from your 3rd, provide a few more additional information. But again, it's not mandatory, just strongly recommended to future-proof anything that might come down the pipe. The second question is, if I've already turned in my application, what happens next? Or if I turned it in too early? Those of you that turned in an application before the proposals, I've already tagged your issues in GitHub. If you have any questions, the best way to flag those is in your applications. But essentially, you're good to go. We'll just ask for a little bit more information as we go through it. So what happens next is we'll be just collecting these right now. The window closes tomorrow. So if you haven't turned in your application, tomorrow is your last day. We're not going to be sticklers with time zones. Just close a business Wednesday. I'll make an issue in GitHub and say, hey, we're going to cap. We've already done it. So whatever your time zone is, Wednesday is the deadline to kind of submit that. We'll score everything and announce it on December 9th. So with that, I'm going to mute and see if anybody has any questions, anything about the process with the elections. All right, I'll consider that time. We hit a lot of these. If anything comes up, plenty of time, DM, and we'll get through it. All right, here's the open issues that we have on deck. Phil, would you feel comfortable speaking to 702 and 666 or Simon? Otherwise, I'll try to take a swing at him and probably.
Yeah, I got it. I can speak for 702.
I appreciate that. The floor is yours, bud.
Right, cool. So proposal 702 came about because there was a previous proposal. Shout out to Faye Yan of Kernel Logic for creating a proposal 662. And 662 was basically asking, hey, recently the LDN multisig has been running out of data cap a lot. And because of that depletion, it's become a bottleneck for notaries to get their data cap. Notaries to issue their data cap to the clients. That is a big issue. So our current proposal to solve this is to increase the amount of refill from every week. So instead of refilling the data cap, the LDN multisig to a 2-week expected amount, we're gonna refill it to a 4-week expected. Meaning that like instead of refilling it up to a point where we expect this amount is gonna be used up in 2 weeks, we're gonna refill it up to a point where we think that this amount is gonna be used up to 4 weeks. This would give the LDN multisig a greater buffer, so there will be less instances where you won't get your data cap because the LDN multisig is empty. That's one. And then two, we also realized that because of Lisbon, and because of all the travel, all the crypto events happening this week, a lot of the root key holders have not been able to respond very early to refilling the LDN multisig. So, and on top of that, sometimes even when they do, so there's a bug with the front end and they cannot actually sign to refill the multisig, which is really difficult. So we are going to also train them to make sure that they know how to use the Lotus node, so then they can sign it from there instead of signing it from a front end, just in case it ever empties out. So with these two in place, there should be way less instances when the LDN multisig is out of data cap, and therefore that would be less of a bottleneck. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to reach out to me or about it an issue, or if you have any comments now, you can also speak up here. Chow. I think this is a question about the notary election. Yes, you do need a ledger for the round 4 notary election. We do need an address. You can use the same address as you did for the round 3. Any questions about notary elections or this issue? All right, cool. I think with that, I'll give it back to K-Ray to talk about the other issues.
My man, thanks, Phil. We also have a guest speaker. Hong Hao, are you on the line? I see your avatar there. Are you okay to speak to 666 in the next 702?
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Mind going to the next slide? Cool. Server formatting wasn't aligned with the Field Plus call. Wasn't aware. Hi everyone, Hong Hao here. I'm with Torfin. We're both from the Bedrock team, specifically on the indexing side of things. And today we want to discuss the scoping for default indexing. It's less of an announcement, more of hoping to get feedbacks from folks in this call on some of the options that we're considering for indexing. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so context today, network indexer, basically for folks not aware, these are kind of beefy machines that we run to store the index and enable the content routing for Filecoin and ipfs network to help scale the DHT. And today the indexer is set to default a nonce index plus the configuration to not index it. And this was designed based on the assumption that most of the data in the network are public data. So that's why we designed it to be default index, and unless you specify otherwise. The goal here is we notice there are more and more demand for enterprise use case, more private data, and we're thinking about evolving the platform infrastructure to better serve these business needs. Among which one of the things that we're thinking is, should we change the default indexing mechanism to better serve these non-public data's need? Specifically, one thing we plan to do is want to add its public flag to the deal schema. And basically, if you set it as true, it means that the data is supposed to be public, which implies it could be indexed or retrieved. And for deals that are set as not public, we plan to later introduce access control to help guard the content. And this is essentially working with SigGravity and Lighthouse storage sort of solutions to integrate with the access control mechanism. This is pretty much in line, I think, with the common cloud practices anywhere like AWS or Azure. It's basically have no assumption on the data that the data is public unless this is set as public, and we only index those ones. So we have more comments on this, more notes on its public flag that we can discuss more in the last slide. But the question we want to get to is what data should be default published to the indexer. And we have a couple of options that we'd like to discuss here. If we go to the next slide. Thank you. There's 3 options. In short, the first option is we scope down the default indexing to only index for the Filecoin Plus deals that have fast retrieval enabled and verified deals. This is configurable, so you can also turn it off by setting the is public flag equals false. And if either fast retrieval or verified is false, then we default not to index it unless it's configured otherwise. There is a proposal that has more details in this. I would paste it in the chat. So this link includes more detail on how this could be implemented. The second one is a more conservative option, which is we default not to index for all of the deals, and unless you configure to turn it on for specific deals by setting the is public flag equals true. And this is a more conservative option, and obviously it has some potential impact for the historical data as well. The thinking over here is we don't want to change the historical data because there's a lot of complexity over there. So if we go with this option, we'll leave the legacy index intact for the older deals, but going forward, once effective, it applies to the future deals going forward. And then number 3 is basically in line with what we're doing today, default index for all of the deals, but adding capability to configure turn off indexing for specific ones by setting is public equals false. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the different options. I would love to pause here and just open the floor and hear feedbacks from folks on the call, especially folks that has experience doing private data storage or enterprise use cases. What do you think about these options? Is there any strong preference here?
Hi, this is Charles.
Hey, Charles.
Yeah. It's a very great idea. Generally speaking, I like this idea to have the access control. We do contact to lots of universities. They really care about, they will emphasize that those data, we don't want the people outside the lab to be accessed. Some of them is okay, some of them not. So they were asking us about how to process that. We don't have answer for them. I think this one will be a good approach for it. However, on the notary side, I'm not sure. This is already something we happens with enterprise notary applications. So it's become something it's harder to define. Is the the data is accessible? So maybe how to manage the SAR is a little bit more flexible, right? So I think this is more flexible than the one only. It's not really unencrypted data. So basically, it's just the access control, right?
I think there's 2 things here. One is whether we index it, basically announce it for content discovery, and then there will later be additional access control on top of that. I think for access control, you're referring to things like whitelist, blacklist, these kind of things. Yeah. And that will be additional layer that will be introduced. Yeah.
Okay, is IP based or something like a traditional wallet based or email based like a Web 2A? So which it will be like?
You mean for the access control?
Yeah, where it's IP based or wallet based or email based?
Yeah, I don't think that has been fully thought through. Lauren, specifically on the booth side, they're working with SigGravity. Right now, the current thought is to be in line with what SigGravity is doing, which I believe is IP-based, but don't quote me for that. Yeah, but the goal is to integrate with different access control solutions into the market to help guard the content. And over here, this is kind of like the first step, which is on whether we default publish the index or not.
Okay,
cool. Thanks. I saw a lot of raised hands. Danny, you want to jump in this?
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. So just so I understand, and you may have explained this, I got distracted. So the fast retrieval flag is just basically signaling that there's a hot copy, an unsealed copy, right, of the deal. And a verified deal, what does that signify?
Yeah, I guess Filecoin folks here can explain more. My understanding is verified deals are the ones that are passed by the notary and be counted as a Filecoin Plus deals. Yeah, I think we joined this morning's call. So there is a feedback from this morning, which personally made me feel like number one is not really feasible. Is Filecoin Plus program, the Enterprise Filecoin Plus program, they would have data that are also fast retrieval enabled and verified deals, but they are enterprise data and they want privacy. So we hear pushback this morning regarding the first option, and more specifically, what I'm wondering right now is if for the use cases, do you see the do you see like if we default index for all the deals and have it and allow it to be turned off for individual deals, like do you see red flags over there? Basically the mechanism that we do today for the private data storage, or there's a strong preference that these should be all default index all.
So I guess one of the things I wanted to check is that even though this is in the index, right now, there is no actual access control on any of these things. So when so this is purely about indexing.
I think we can view if it helps. The mental model that I took right now is that there's indexing layer, which is more like whether we make this content discoverable, but this doesn't imply much on the actual retrievability side of things. And on the retrievability side, there need to be access control layer. So so by setting the is public flag equals true, like saying this data is public, is very similar to kind of what AWS, you say this data is public, then basically, there's no gating to this content at all. But when you say like on AWS side, when you set it as by default equals false, which means that data is not public, then there's all these additional layers of access control, authentication that comes into place, which I think we will also need to introduce for enterprise data in Filecoin.
So this is a bit more, this is public bin is more like kind of a robots.txt kind of thing where it's basically flagging, please don't index this, right? Because you could have a third-party indexer that actually, let me break that into a separate question, which is, so these flags and this information is not stored on chain, right?
That's a great question. If we can go to the next slide, I think there's a discussion point actually on this, which is so I'll talk about number one later, but for number two, right now we're thinking we'll include is public in the deal proposal, which is not on chain. In this call, we actually want to understand if there is demand, if there's any need that actually justify this information to be stored on chain, because I'm not quite sure whether we actually need it on chain.
So I guess my question is about the indexer, which is if this stuff isn't stored on chain, how are you seeing it? Are you watching the traffic on the network for these deal proposals?
Oh, you mean okay, I see. So basically today how it works is that there's these DEX store that boost basically the market basically generates these data in the DEX store. In that store, you leverage the DEX store as the source of truth, and there's advertisement generated and basically indexers sync these DEX source data into the indexer. So once it's public is introduced, then basically there will be additional data in the DEX store that we can check from, and then for those ones we just don't generate the advertisement. Okay.
So one of the reasons the reason I'm asking all of this is really for how this affects the notary due diligence. One of the things that we've sort of been thinking about is tooling to make it easier for us to retrospectively take a look at what data has been stored. And so, one of our conditions might be for non-enterprise fill that is public should be set true, right? So this is more like, okay, if we set up these rules and that, for instance, fill plus enterprise can choose to make is public false, we might want to require other verified deals to allow indexing. So I think that might be one thing we do sort of reciprocally on our end.
Yeah. I think that's something that we need to align, with whatever approach that we decided to go with, we will need to align with Fill Plus. If, like, say, if they want to do reputation system, retrieval checking, these sort of thing, then there should be alignments of like these data should be indexed and retrievable so that they can be held accountable.
this is not so much like you making the rule around number one, but us stipulating that if you want a verified deal that isn't an enterprise deal, it needs to be fast retrieval and it needs to be public. I think we require it to be fast retrieval right now.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the case. James, I saw your hand up.
Yeah. A note on that last comment, Fill Plus does not require fast retrieval. That's just a slingshot requirement for that I know of.
Is there any, oh, sorry, I'm curious, for Fill Plus side of things, beyond slingshot, is there any Fill Plus data that are required or expected to be retrievable? Which means that it might be checked on later on for
yeah.
to.
That just depends on the client, you know, working with the SPs. If they say that they want the SPs to have fast retrieval for it, otherwise there's no other guideline.
I can speak to that actually. There's I think the data program team is trying to develop something maybe in the future to like kind of like create incentives for people to make it retrievable. It's still in the works though, so it will come out in the future. There will be something called like a validation bot that like checks, that can ping you to check if you have like something retrievable.
Well, Phil, retrievable and fast retrievable are different, right? Yeah.
My bad.
My explaining differences over here.
By fast retrieval, you mean like Saturn?
No, fast retrieval is a config on the miner side that you store a unsealed copy of the data, so you don't have to unseal before people can retrieve the data.
Yes, and by retrievable, did you mean like you just keep a sealed copy?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I meant fast retrievable.
Oh, okay, got it.
Fast retrievable. So we want to figure out how we can check whether people have an unsealed copy, and that's still in the works. But in the future, there will be something there. I think that's the direction we're heading.
Got it. Yeah, I think in that case, what I would imagine happening is, so for Slingshot program, we're already working with Slingshot team for enforcing indexing. So I think there's probably no question about that. But beyond Slingshot, for any Fill Plus deals that has requirements to be checked on fast retrieval, like say by DealBot, then I think there will be some sort of, I guess there will be some source of truth from the data program side about these are the data that need to be checked on, that need to be fast retrievable, and then we can basically make sure that these data are indexed through the is public flag. Cool. Is there any strong opinions on whether this is public flag should be on chain or not?
Okay, Stephen from ipfs is speaking. In my own opinion, I don't think this public should be on chain. It should be only a local configuration. That would be enough, I think. Any special reason we need to have this on chain? It's because the index is actually index itself. If you don't have the index, indexer, your data still could be retrievable, right? So we only ask the service provider who has the Filecoin Plus deals must have their data be retrievable. So they could define if they want to be indexed or not. It could be local configuration would be fine. That's my opinion.
Okay, sounds good. I think that's what I'm inclined to right now too. Is I'm not sure if I see the clear reason why this should be on chain, because you can check the indexer for this data or DEX store. So like mostly indexer, you should be able to check it over there. So I'm not quite sure if it is something that's required to be on chain. But yeah, if I don't hear any rejection, then I think we'll keep it off chain for now, and revisit later if we hear strong requirements on this.
What's the timeline for the decision, the final decision?
I mean, we want to make decision ASAP. So if we go back to the last slide for those 3 options, yeah. So the next step, what we are thinking is we will update the discussion post that we posted earlier, the link here, with the kind of outcomes that we gathered from this community. And then our team has some opinion on which direction to go for. And then we'll basically have internal alignment based on these feedbacks. And then we'll post a follow-up on the working group channel for what we decided to go, what we propose to go with. And then we can go from there if we get majority SP's approval. But this should happen pretty soon if we want to make the changes here.
And how long is this? Like the couple of weeks or next week, or to have that in mind?
You call us as an interesting time, because I would come into your timeline, but I wouldn't, because I'm actually moving over to the FEM team, and Torping's going to be the new PM over here, so I don't want to overspeak for him, but he's still ramping up, so we'll figure out get back soon once we have an alignment internally, like with Torping and the team.
All right, thanks.
Cool, thanks. No, Kevin, back to you. I think we're done here.
Outstanding. Appreciate you joining the line. Appreciate you giving the rundown. I'll make sure that this is in the video. We'll have the subtitles ready for anybody that might have any more follow-up questions. Here's the last 2. These are hardly as deep dive. These are 2 open proposals. We're going to close them out this week. So just consider this like one last chance for feedback. 625, it's asking in the LDN application for your country and industry questions. This wasn't too controversial. There wasn't a lot of feedback in the issue, but this is just the one last call. I'm going to pause if anybody has any strong conviction on why this should not go through. This is that last moment at the wedding before the vows are approved. Seeing no frantic waving of hands, we'll move on. Feel free to post in that GitHub. KZ will be closing that out. The other one is 631, very, very similar. It's an email question to the LDN template. This just really helps with the trust and transparency if we're going to be candid with it. So if someone's asking for this large amount of data, we just like to have some way to verify that they're with the organization that they are claiming to be. So including the email in that template just adds to that level of KYC that we're doing. Again, this wasn't a very controversial issue. I'll put 631 in the chat if you want to take a look at this one, but just consider this one friendly flag. These proposals have been open for about 3 weeks. We're going to close them out. So just one last chance if you had strong conviction to come through. All right, with that, Phil Lisbon, that was a great event. It was nice to see some of you guys there in person. We had all the recordings from the Phil Plus day that happened out there transcribed and posted to YouTube. They're in the Notary Governance channel on YouTube. I'll link that here shortly. We also have the subtitles translated to Mandarin. I hope that was helpful for those of you that aren't English speaking by native. The 5 main talks that are there is Phil and Simon walk through a program overview. The intent of that 10-minute video was if someone had not heard of Filecoin Plus and you wanted to just link them to somebody talking about it at a very high surface level view, that's what that 10-minute clip is. Galen and Deep spent about 30 minutes giving a State of the Union on the Phil Plus program. What are the goals right now? What are we trying to move to in 2023? That's about a 20-30 minute video with some questions built into it. Then we had RG and KZ both give a retrospective on what their working groups are trying to accomplish, how to get involved. Their individual talks are only 15 minutes, so it's a really quick digest if you were curious about it. And then there's another 20 minutes of questions, comments, and discussions. And the last video is with the Notary Election. It's going to be outdated here in about 3 days, but it was just pretty much an FAQ, how to get involved, what's the goal of the notary program, and then how are the elections going to work. So all of those are on the Notary Governance YouTube channel. If you have any questions, comments, please let me know and we'll get that updated for you. So with that, we have about 20 minutes left, which is rare with a group of 45 of us on the call. Normally we solicit topics for the agenda inside of the GitHub. We'll save time for the LDN applications. I'd like to turn the floor over to anybody on the call. If there's anything you wanted to flag, discuss, or raise as a question, just feel free to raise a hand and we'll call on you to call. Know when to call a good thing when we see it. All right, if anyone changes your mind, just feel free to stick that hand up.
Oh, I think there was
Yes,
a
John.
question in
Yeah.
chat.
Go ahead.
Hi there. I just wondered, how is the File Plus program tracking?
I think I can speak to that. So we just did the pilot for eFil Plus. KZ is the person on this, but he's out today. So the pilot is running. We're going through our first few applications and seeing how that goes. Depending on how the first one goes, we'll decide how to develop the tooling afterwards. So currently what you can do is like you apply eFil Plus, you go through KYB with KZ, and there are different steps to it. You can just Slack KZ on through DMs to like ask him how that works, and then afterwards there's a notary process where you are assigned 2 random notaries, and those 2 random notaries have to approve you. This is for eFil Plus, yeah.
Also, if anyone just wants to just stay up to date, we do have a Fil Plus Enterprise Working Group, just to get the latest updates or just to learn more about it. So I can also copy the working group Slack channel into the chat.
Yeah, we have calls once a week, I believe, and that's where they give updates of how eFil Plus is working.
Okay, great. And just a quick question about those 2 notaries. Do both 2 notaries sign it off, have to sign it off? And are they from 2 continents? How does that work?
So currently it's completely random, and since it's a pilot program, those notaries, it comes from a unique set of 20 notaries that and these notaries volunteered to be part of the eFil experiment. And so like these people, it's just like this 20 notaries, and it's just randomly from those 20. And we know that these 20 notaries participate a lot, and they're good, and they do due diligence properly. So that's why yeah, they volunteer. In the future, we have plans to make it by region and by industry and more on that end, but we don't have enough range to do that yet. We don't have enough notaries to do that yet.
Perfect. And one last question. What do you foresee once you submit an application, how long do you think that diligence process will take? Are we saying 7 days from apply to sign off to data cap awarded?
Is this for eFil Plus or Fil Plus in general?
File E.
Yes. So for eFil Plus, File E Plus, so this would take, depends on the KYB process and depends on how fast that can be done, because how it works is we're outsourcing to a third party for the KYB process before it's adding an extra step, basically. And that's like the outsourcing the due diligence to like a KYB. We want to do this because it's for private data, right? So that's why the extra step. So what I can tell you is that it would probably, realistically, like as this scales, it would probably be longer. Depending, it really depends on like how fast you like do the KYB, I guess, that if that makes sense.
Yeah, just to also jump in real quickly, Jonathan, these are all really good questions. Again, as Phil said, this is a pilot, so hence entailing that we are still gathering data. This is for us to actually see and kind of experiment what we can see from this. I think these are all good questions that you can ask towards the Phil Plus Enterprise Working Group chat, which KZ is involved as well. And I believe these are just, again, good questions and feedback that we can get to hopefully improve the overall experience.
All right, thanks very much.
I think the short answer right now, it should be faster if you keep in touch with KZ a lot. But in the future, it might be slower as eFil Plus gets bigger. That's the short answer.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. I think someone has their Darlene.
Hello, everyone. And I have a question that what if my node is 2 days away? It will be 2 years old. It can be used to provide that I have 2 years in the notary rubric in the time commitment.
I guess that's related to the notary elections.
Yeah. Sorry, could you repeat your question?
Okay. My question is, if my node is 2 days away, it will be 2 years old. Can it be used to provide that I have 2 years in the time commitment in the notary rubric of the notary rubric?
Yes. So I think for the time commitment, I believe this is, are you talking about like engagement to the program or time commitment at the top of the rubric? Give me a second.
Second one.
Second one.
Yes.
Yes, I believe it should be 2 years. Yeah. If you're
Thank
you. Check the rubric again.
Thank you.
Sweet. Thanks for raising that. Feel free to circle back. The two last things I want to flag, and then we'll give each other some time back. In chat, it looks like we have issue 301. I can't tell as I multitask. It looks like this is just waiting for a second notary signature. If there's any notaries on the line right now that want to be the second signatory on this one, it looks like Fembucci came through, asked some diligent questions. This is kind of stalled for the past few weeks. I'll flag this for review in one of our channels, but you might see this come through in the chat. If any notaries on the line want to sign this, it looks like that's still waiting. So I'll just put that out there for the radar. On that note too, we had 4 LDNs submit videos for their applications as well. What's nice about applications and notaries, LDNs that take the time to do this is just trying to make that diligence process a little bit faster. So with these 4 videos, they're obviously linked in this slide deck. I'll also post them in the notary channel as well as the Phil application review. But just any notaries on the line, if you're looking for like a really quick application that might already have done a lot of the diligence for you without having to follow up and really dig deep, ideally the goal of individuals taking this step is to put that on your radar. I know that we had flags specifically from Dubu today, so I'll be posting that in the notary channel. It's a TV online sharing platform. They're looking to fast track that ones that come through. So again, I'll post the videos for these in our notary channel as well as the regions that they're specific to. But if any notaries are on the line and want to take a look, I'll also pause to see if any of these LDN applicants are on the line and they just want to take just a quick moment and answer questions, not give a presentation, but just any kind of updates that they want to share on that. Right. We'll make this last call. Any alibis, saved rounds, or any last thoughts before we call it? Wonderful. Well, thank you everybody for coming to the second notary governance call of November 15th. We'll post this on YouTube in the next couple of days. If you have any questions, please post it in Slack. And again, the election deadline closes November 16th, which is tomorrow. Thank you very much. Have a great night, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. See ya.